Hello, everybody. How are you? Good. Well, thank you so much for coming out here tonight. We're so grateful, as always, to be invited to participate by our friends at Boswell Books. They've just been a tremendous partner for us over the years and just such a gem for our whole community. So thank you. Thank you, Dan. My name is Samantha Abramson. I'm the Executive Director at the Nathan and Ester Pelz Holocaust Education Resource Center. We are a program of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. We are the leading Holocaust educator serving not only Milwaukee, but the entire state of Wisconsin. We successfully helped get Holocaust education mandated in schools about 2 years ago, and we just completed the first year of the mandate in effect. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And during that time, we educated about 550 Wisconsin-based educators in public and private school settings. We impacted over 100,000 students in Wisconsin, and we're going to be celebrating all of this on September 6th at our first inaugural event celebrating. So please go to our website. We have a few staff members in the back, Michael and Jen. Hi, everybody. They have some information about more of the work we do, so please feel free to stop by and say hi to them afterwards. But really tonight is all about this really fantastic book that Judy Rakowsky wrote for us. And I really want to spend some time just introducing Judy. As you know, the book is Jews in the Garden. It took me, I don't know how many pages, not many. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly in the book what this book is based on and where this name comes from. And it's rather sinister origin. So Jews in the Garden, a Holocaust survivor, the fate of his family, and the secret history of Poland in World War II, is a beautifully written memoir. It's written again by the award-winning journalist, Judy Rakowsky, and the book really does read like an investigation. And we are following not only her story, of course, but the story of her family and a 99-year-old Holocaust survivor named Sam. Who really goes on countless trips to Poland with Judy to try reconnecting with his family story and to try finding relatives and possibly even a living relative who hasn't been discovered. So to their surprise, when Judy and Sam started asking family friends there about what happened to Henna, this what we believe might be a living survivor from Sam's family, they're met with silence. There's no one really wants to come forward and explain what happened to Henna. And doors slam in their faces. It gets very awkward. There are a lot of awkward silences that happen in these pages. And the question becomes, why these people in Poland who had once been very close to Sam and his family, why are they so reluctant to share what they know? And Jews in the Garden is really becomes this crime scene, exploring this whole country, Poland, that is we're still reckoning with its past. Certainly, I think in America we can think about that too, and we're really thinking about this book as Holocaust denial is rising again, not only in the United States and Poland, but globally. So I think this book offers us an opportunity to really ask those questions of what don't we know yet, and why don't we know it, and how can we be doing more to uncover those hidden stories? So, Judy, I loved your book. Again, you get that strong sense of you as an investigative journalist throughout. There's a line towards the beginning of your book when you're reflecting on how this is going to be one big crime scene, and it just reminds me so much about, again, what we as historians are still continuing to uncover. And it's often through these family stories that come into play when generations start asking questions. So let's start at the beginning. Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your family's connection to the Holocaust, what you knew about your family's connection and at what age? And when did you first start becoming aware of Sam's story and of these other deaths in the family?
Well, that's a big first question.
It is. I know. We start easy.
So first, before I do that, I would like to see by a show of hands, how many people here have a personal connection to the Holocaust that you know of? That you know of. Okay. I do this now every time I talk because I'm just really fascinated by what brings people out, what what people know. And almost always I hear stories about attempts to talk to relatives and to find out details from your own family. So I grew up in Ohio with cows across the street, not too different from some people here perhaps. And I didn't know much at all about my family's connections to the Holocaust. We were just told that we're so lucky Grandpa came in 1913 and whatever happened back there was, we didn't talk about. I did hear something vaguely about camps, but it's very confusing for a kid to hear about camps and have it be something bad because you were looking forward to summer camp. But so anyway, obviously it didn't stay that way. When I was, then fast forward, I'm a young reporter. I'd already gone to University of Michigan, sorry, where I worked at the student paper with my friend Brian Blanchard, who's here. And, after that, as a young reporter, I went to Passover at my cousin's house. And this is in the book. And after dinner, he jumps up and, throws this slideshow. Remember slide projectors? Yeah. He did this slide projector. He said, "Let me show you where you come from." And he starts showing these pictures of this place. And he's, looking at these gray, stucco pictures. And he's like, "See, isn't this great?" And you're like, "Okay." And that was the beginning. That night, he started to pull the curtain back on what happened to, some of my relatives, and even the grim stories I found just fascinating. And then I eventually came back after I was in the audience when Elie Wiesel said to a gathering, I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, and he said, "You have to listen to the survivors." And that's when I started talking to Sam seriously.
And so you start your search with Sam.
Wait, I should jump. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I wrote a story about him, about his survival, and I interviewed him over a series of interviews and wrote a magazine story about him. And I said, "Why didn't you ever talk about this before?" And he said, "I didn't think anyone really cared." And I think that's actually a pretty common theme that, survivors and a lot of people felt like, I'll just keep this to myself. Other traumatic experiences, we know this is, common too. But then after that story came out, I said, "Do you think you're ever going to go back to Poland? Because if you do, I'd like to tag along." And then a few years later, in fact, I started accompanying him on what would turn into 9 trips over many decades back to his hometown, where he still felt very much at home.
And when you started going on these trips, what were you hoping to find? Did you have a goal?
Well, I was fascinated by the prospect that there was a living survivor, that of all these grim stories and all this, very tragic, realities on the ground in Poland, that there was somebody that was still out there. And she hadn't contacted anyone from the family. And as a reporter, I was just like a dog with a bone. I wanted to find her.
And in fact, you opened the book, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. You should all read it. Buy it here. It's, you right away, we are immersed into that story, and we are asking those questions of, did she survive and how? And it's just, it follows us from the beginning of the book until the last page.
Well, I think we all find massive events, numbers of 6 million, anything like that, almost impossible to comprehend. And even, my own family tree and this one and that one, it's just very overwhelming. But this one person, this 16-year-old that survived the massacre of her family and walked away and disappeared, just still to this day, I'm just really gripped by her life.
Yeah, thank you.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. No, I was really careful there. As you and Sam started, you went to on trips to Poland, you started questioning family, friends, and neighbors of Sam's who he knew about this relative's whereabouts. You were surprised originally, I think, with the amount of silence and denial that you received. And I think there was actually an actual door shut in your face at one point. Why do you think people were so hesitant to give you information?
Well, what was so striking was the mixed messages, because we were welcomed into the homes of his former schoolmates, people who were family business connections, and like feasts were laid out. I mean, this woman would go into the kitchen and start making homemade noodles, and, we were greeted like family. And then when this one question, and they were telling lots of other stories, but when the matter of Henya came up, they just literally face into soup. It just was, it's like, and I, of course, did not know everything that was being said, because my cousin Sam always said he was going to translate for me, and then he didn't. So I'm like reading body language and looking at every little thing, looking for clues. And that's why I noticed, the level of detail that you'll find in the book is really is from that, because I didn't know everything they were saying, but I learned a phrase that was very, very repetitive in these experiences. And it was the Polish for I don't know, nie wiem. So we'd go someplace, they'd start talking, and then I'd hear Henya, and then it was nie wiem. And so it became this wall of amnesia that was astounding for people that were friendly and welcoming and taking the presents and all that. And that made me even more curious about what was behind that.
And you call it in the book a conspiracy of silence, which existed, as you saw, your trips spanned several decades going to Poland, and you were there. You experienced Poland in a few different formats, a few different time periods. It existed before the 2018 laws, and what changed? Over the course of your research, going in and out of Poland, how did that impact your work?
Well, first of all, a lot of American Jews in particular, Jews around the world, kind of feel like history stopped in 45. And actually, the communism, 5 decades of a totalitarian system that controlled all information and the narrative in textbooks and monuments and everything, is a huge factor. And so I actually got very, sort of, I had to understand where they were coming from and what lives people had been living for a very long time with very little. And you see the effects of blotting out a chunk of history over time. And then people don't know anything. And that was what was really striking. So that's part of what a conspiracy sounds like, a very, a specter of intent, shall we say. And I think that what started out as communism then became something that people couldn't really face, some of the role that individual Poles and underground soldiers had played in being complicit in the Holocaust. And it was just memories they did not want to they didn't want to look at it again.
And certainly, I'm no expert in Polish history, but I know, of course, a fair amount of what happens to Poland during the Holocaust and World War II. And it's complicated, right? Because on one hand, Poland is a victim of the Nazis and of Germany invading. I think there was a statistic that there's 6 million people in Poland, and
3 million Jews in Poland died, and 3 million Poles, non-Jewish Poles. So it's the level of victimization is horrible. I mean, Poland was occupied longer than any country, and Poland actually saved. There were more Jews honored, Poles honored at Yad Vashem for saving Jews than any other country. So it's really complicated, and it's really, it's really not as black and white as anyone wants to make it. But there's also the facts that we found on the ground, under the ground, that are pretty unavoidable as well. And the other thing that, in terms of, my reporting, my investigation, was we come at things here, like we go to an office, we ask for information, and we have an expectation we'll get it. But it's not like that there. Courts are not open. You don't go just look up records. And that was, something created by the communists, and it has actually been exacerbated in recent years under the current government. So it's easier to erase history when people can't have information.
And could you talk a little bit more? I know we're talking about erasing history, and certainly I think some of us, but maybe not all of us, are aware of what's been going on in Poland the last few years in particular, and certainly the rise of right-wing government there that has created laws that actually make it illegal for certain pieces of Holocaust history to be told. How did that impact your investigation, and what are your lingering thoughts for today about it?
Well, what's really a few points I really need to make first, one of which is I was so lucky to have a living relative to travel with back to this, where he grew up, and to actually tell me what it used to be like, and to actually have that, that information, that companionship, that relationship. And also I was lucky to see, because my trip started so early, right after communism, I saw this whole arc of change. And right after communism fell, Poland had this, first of all, Poland brought down Soviet communism. I mean, it is a world rock star for what it achieved, that, and then it became a vibrant, incredible market economy, leading all the former Soviet bloc countries. And it had this wonderful period of openness, and academics got access to all these files, and there was just all kinds of, robust democracy. And in fact, this very history that's now illegal to mention, in 2001, it's all in the book, but some of the facts get a little distant. The Polish president apologized for Poland's acts that were complicitous in the Holocaust, and the Catholic bishops came out and said the same. So this is not something that has never been done. But then there was this incredible backlash that came after. It was a backlash to a book that many of you may have heard of called Neighbors. And it was about this 1941 community northeast of Warsaw called Jedwabne. And it had always been said that the Germans had killed the town's Jews. And the revelation was that, in fact, the Jewish population was herded into a barn, and it was set on fire. Just a ghastly, grisly event. And it was Jan Gross, who was at NYU, then Princeton, wrote this book. And it was, kind of like other revelations that we've seen come out about history. And then there was this enormous backlash. And the backlash was so profound that it led to this rise of a right-wing populist government that has basically destroyed a lot of pillars of democracy, including the independent judiciary that was becoming quite vibrant, independent media, and has promulgated laws, including this Holocaust memory law that says that it's against the law in Poland to say that Poles were in any way complicitous in the Holocaust. And if anyone read the New York Times review about my book, okay, it's got a spoiler in it, so I don't know if I want you to read it. But this historian said, this is well settled. When I'm talking about, this is not a disputed fact. It's just more than the Polish psyche can take, because the victimization of Poland was profound, and it is real, and people feel very, they don't want to accept it. So it's like a psychological challenge that is having this spasm that's taking form in the in the country. Long answer, sorry.
No, it's good. Thank you. And, it's especially, I'm interested in how you are thinking about Poland today, because we're actually, as a community, there is a trip in the works that's being organized by the Milwaukee Jewish Federation in partnership with HERC that is going to be happening next spring. I think there are a couple attendees going in the room. And, we'll be going to Poland, and we're going to learn about, of course, the sites of the Holocaust. We'll be visiting many camps. We're also going to go to the Poland Museum, and we're going to learn about the vibrant Jewish history and culture that spans thousands of years in that country. When you were in
And
Poland,
you'll find out that the name for Poland was something that the Jews gave. Anyway,
no, it's okay.
I actually have a lot of affection for Poland. I have a lot of friends, contemporaries, and just deep bonds now. I mean, this is another gift that my cousin Sam gave me, visiting again and again. And when you get to know real people, it's not the same as reading academic stuff and just coming up with generalizations. And that's where we are. And so I'm going September 5th. My cousin Sam, the one that just turned 99, is being honored as the last Jewish survivor of Kazimierz Wielka. I know that rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? And we're really excited about going. I don't know if anybody's going to give me any trouble for the book, but it's just always different when you get to know people. And I just heard a phrase today that applies to some of the wonderful teachers and people that we have met there. They're called memory workers, people that are preserving memories. And there are a lot of wonderful things going on, cleaning up cemeteries. There's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot to be also inspired by.
Yeah, and your book ends sort of on that note of optimism. Again, no spoilers, we're not doing that. But, it does end on a surprisingly optimistic note, considering where the book starts. And I'm wondering, what does that mean for the future of Poland in your mind? What does that mean for the new generations that are coming to terms with the history and all of its complexities right now?
Well, you may have gathered that I'm kind of a curious person, and I think we should all be curious about where we come from and what was the context for the people that came before us. And, I think that what is going to happen in Poland that's really positive is that these younger people that didn't get some of this benefit of education or learning history, the experience I've been is that people really want to know. They want to know, they want to connect. I mean, the people from this town are like, why isn't our whole family coming for this? And, why wouldn't you come back here? This is where you're from. And that is really, to me, what's so inspiring. People that are wanting to know more. Many people in Poland that we ran across over time were so moved by my cousin Sam because he could tell them, your community was 30% Jewish. People there did this and that and the, it's like, it's just really being open is really the way of the future.
And you've developed relationships with many of the next generation within these families who in some cases helped rescue Jews, including family members.
Yes, in fact, I just had a birthday recently, and my Facebook Messenger and Facebook was full of all the third generation of this family that tried to save my relatives, and that it's just a very unusual bond. Because a lot of these relatives were not ultimately saved, they were murdered, but we still have this connection, and it's something that we've nurtured. And I don't know, it's just, you never know what can happen when you build relationships.
And speaking of relationships, anytime, they always say when an author is writing about real life, it's actually much harder than writing fiction, because you're having to wrestle with the own thoughts and demons going on in your head. And I'm just wondering, just as an author, again, this is your background is in journalism. How did you sort of work with all the feelings you were probably having in those moments? And I'm sure there was feelings of judgment, resentment. You probably know better than I do. but I imagine there was a lot that you had to work through.
Well, I'd never experienced anything. I really never experienced any anti-Semitism growing up or in my life, frankly. I mean, somebody might have said a crossword or something, but to go somewhere and just one breathtaking thing that was said in my presence was, I don't know why you Jews complain. So many of you survived. And I was like, "Ah." I almost couldn't breathe. Because it was like, because you realize because of happenstance of birth, geography is why, some of us are here and some of us aren't. And that was just so stark. And also, what was really interesting is my cousin Sam he wasn't affected by things like that, people said. And I was like, trying to pick my jaw up off the ground, but it was also really interesting to see. It's still interesting to try to figure out what makes people tick and why they're like that. And I obviously went through a lot over time. It's been a very long time in gestation. However, the thing about it is I feel like I know I changed as a person and but I feel more grounded somehow. I don't know. I feel like I should pull up a couch and we can go on.
Therapy's open. No, I think I want to make sure we have time to ask questions that you all have as well. Certainly here we are in Wisconsin in 2023. We're watching anti-Semitism rise in our own state. Our Jewish Community Relations Council here in Milwaukee reported a 500% increase in incidents since 2015 this year. It's something that our Holocaust Education Resource Center is very aware of. When we're speaking with families with middle and high school age students right now, it's on the forefront of their minds, thinking about how do we make sure that we're doing our best to combat anti-Semitism, combat Holocaust denial. What lessons from your book and your investigative work in Poland do you think we need to consider today here in America?
I think the more that we know about the Holocaust, the more we realize that it's not a distant possibility. It's like things, think of the old, frog in the boiling water. I think we really have to think about how we treat each other and how we turn away from extreme behavior, and I don't have all the answers. I just know that we can't just do that. And I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing, the education you're doing. You're taking on the hard task of educating teachers and inspiring and encouraging them to take on these issues in the classroom. We all know that kids come to school with attitudes that they didn't necessarily learn in school. So these are really, really challenging topics. But I did notice there was a 50-state survey done on Holocaust attitudes in 2020. And I believe it was 63% of Wisconsin high school and middle school students believe that something like the Holocaust could happen again. So I think we should listen to them because we're a little older, if I can be so bold as to say about this audience. And I think we should pay attention and we should do our part to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. That same study, by the way, says that Wisconsin ranks #1 in Holocaust awareness. I would like to point out, we're very excited about it. I wasn't even asking. Thanks. It's the work of our wonderful staff and board. In a minute, I'm going to start opening up for questions. I always like to just ask any author I'm working with, is there anything else, again, not giving spoilers away, everybody, but is there anything else you want to leave us with?
I think that the incredible interest people have in genealogy today, in their own roots, and it's my husband who's done a lot of the boxes on the screen that that inform some of my knowledge. Many of those results, by the way, find us related to some surprising people, if anyone's done that work. Some people you know and you never thought you'd be related to. But I think that's really the promise, is to realize that we're a much smaller gene pool overall, and we should really not, think of everyone as so different. Anyway, that's my thought, is that we really need to try to keep talking to each other.
Yeah, thank you. All right. With that, we would love to take some questions from the audience. Yes, Amy Shapiro. Dr. Amy Shapiro.
She's not a plant. So my family was extremely integrated, very friendly with, we were not like religious or, off in some other community business. The town was like, my family had a lumber yard, people were artisans, like they had the stores, and those relationships were the ones that paved the way to hiding places. And because they already had relationships with, they were customers or whatever. So that bond was the hope. And also, Germans did say that if anyone harbored Jews, they would kill the whole family, or that, some of the frequency of that occurring is being disputed in some of the literature, as you probably know. But anyway, what I also was watching in real time as he evolved in his reaction to this, and to go back and at first to be reminded, oh, you're the guy that, we knew your family, you were this, you were, our kids did this together, kind of thing, as we could all relate to. But what was unfathomable is that as soon as the roundups occurred and they went into hiding, and then all their belongings were fair game, I use the line in the book, they went from being people to prey, but they ceased to be people. And so I watched him, how that hurt, to come back and realize that even though they had that relationship, it was irreparable to come back and to realize that had happened. I'm sure there's all kinds of scholarship on this, on that transition. But the other profound thing that he's told me about, this is a little bit of a tangent, but in the camps, when no one had anything, nothing, no one had any possession, whatever, people still stratified. They still had tiers of power. There was still a power dynamic of someone's, and that is just mind blowing. So people will always do certain things. And so I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but knowing it up close is really something to fathom. So there are some sizable is relative to term, Jewish communities or organizations in some of the major cities. In the countryside, very, very little. It's also something that's happened in waves. That there was 1968. There have been continual waves of expulsion. So it's not just the war. There are a lot of efforts at rekindling Jewish life, but it's a work in progress. $38 million, yeah. And that's what a lot of what they say. That's my husband, who knows a lot too. No, but what the term that they use is so and so, you're of Jewish origin, which often means that there was a fair bit of intermarriage, or you find out on your parents' deathbed that you were a hidden child and you were taken in, and, so, and so those are very complex relationships because it's a very anti-Semitic context to grow up in. And then all of a sudden to find out you're Jewish when you are married and have kids, it's a mind-blowing experience. Yeah, there's more on that in the book.
Yeah, Betty, I saw your name in the back, your hand in the back.
It's very complex. I don't have a straight answer for that. I know of, some folks that they may identify publicly as Jewish, but that doesn't mean they practice Judaism in any way. They're oftentimes, I know of some people who are married to devout Catholics. So what the children do, you know what I mean? It's just, it's not like there's like this one way or another. Yes, that's why my cousin Sam is so unusual in that he, even in his own family, it's controversial. He said, I've lived in Israel, I've lived in Ohio, I've lived in Florida, and people say, where do you come from? And when I stand on my street in Poland, I'm home. Now that's a very unusual perspective of a Holocaust survivor.
I saw a hand in the middle there. Yep. Yep, yes. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so particularly my early trips starting in 90, 91, all the monuments in East Germany and in Poland, all the monuments, the narrative was the fascists did this. There was no, and there was no distinction among victims. It was either, the people, and they were victims of Hitler's fascism. And so that narrative continues today. You even see it in the Ukraine-Russian war. But again, nobody learned anything about what had happened, really. It was just that, fascism versus the people. There was a powerful pressure not to talk about it.
Tracy?
So my question is, I learned 3 million why they
It was a war. A lot of people were killed in the, well, the three doesn't make the 6 million that we associate with the deaths of the war. There were 6 million Jews plus 3 million Poles. So all the Jews of Europe were pretty much killed, including 3 million Poles who were Jewish. But the war went on. It was on Polish territory. That was the main tableau of war.
And certainly Poland, we come to my class in January. We're going to talk about the origins of Hitler's worldview and Nazi racial policy. Certainly Polish people were frowned down upon. These were not a people that the Nazis considered to be good breeding stock. If we're talking from a eugenics racial lens. And again, we can't make comparisons here. We can't say that the Nazis targeted the Polish people the same way they targeted Jewish people. Very different. But certainly the Polish people were the Germans did not see them as equals.
They were also considered subhuman.
So they were also, again, the whole Nazi worldview is about a racial ideology And it's a pyramid. And the Jews, of course, are way at the bottom. There's no one lower at the bottom than the Jews. But you have gradients in between. And the Polish people would have been, on the bottom end of that pyramid as well.
Now that we've cheered each other up.
How that process worked out.
I think I originally thought it'd be another article and, but it just kept going deeper and the answers were more elusive. And, again, it's very frustrating when you come from the background and perspective of an American journalist where you can go and look up information. I'm not even talking about about language, the different languages and everything, and how hard it was to get information and how difficult it was to verify information and how challenging the witnesses were. And so it just kind of kept going on and on and on. But on the other hand, I've never had any topic that I've been endlessly curious about and, couldn't kind of quit. So that's on me. Well, originally I was going to just write a book about my cousin and his story, but then I got to these other relatives and this other trail, and and then something I think snapped when I saw the reaction to Yedvabna, and then I saw, wow, this is a different book. So I could have written a different book back then, and then it changed. So I think I don't think that's really rare among a lot of authors who keeps thinking that's a different book now. And then when this law was passed, I was like, that's really something, that the truth is illegal. Yes, but there are an awful lot of people that are just, there's no way to, I mean, it's the enormity of the situation is pretty amazing. I mean, some people don't want to be found. To some extent, I guess when there's still something very rudimentary there. It's still like when I was going again and again and again to the Jewish Historical Institute, the Ringelbaum Center there was something else before that, and talking to these people that are working exactly with people like that. But they were dying to present the latest scrap of information about people to my cousin. Like, did you ever know this person and this person? There's nothing like a live person to bridge those gaps. But there are so many mysteries, and also there are a lot of stories that come up when you find out what the truth was, like who you actually are related to or not.
Any final questions, or we're gonna wrap up? I have one more final question for you. And I've been thinking about this all night, actually, because certainly the book and the story, it's a story about rescuers, but in many cases it's rescuers who weren't, not always successful in that mission. They are at times, for many reasons, the victims, they're victims. I don't want to give away too many spoilers here, but if you were sort of talking to a student, and we're often talking with students about rescuers and the Holocaust, because we always want to end on a positive note. And that's, it's always something I think we want to do. We don't want to leave students in that dark place where humanity is out of control and we're killing people. How do you talk about rescuers in the context with, you know, when, again, when mission isn't always successful, what does that mean? How do you feel students can learn from that?
So one of the most moving experiences I had on this was my cousin decided to take his Shoah Foundation interview of all Holocaust, you know, Steven Spielberg, you know, created this whole database of oral histories. He said, let's take it on location. So we went to Poland and, you know, and he's interviewed there and by a Polish speaking woman and a film crew. And on the edge of this scene appears a mother in her 30s and a young boy. And they did not know the story of what had happened on their very farm, that a family had been killed and was still buried there. And after the filming was wrapped up, the interviewer went over to this woman and this boy and said, your family did something very good. I want you to always remember that. They did something very, very good. And I have followed that boy, he's now the father of 2 sons, to this day, and it had such a profound impact on him to embrace the, you know, how amazing it was that his family did this incredibly righteous thing. And that's had a profound effect on me as well.
Well, thank you so much, Judy. It's been just a delight. And thank you, as always, to Boswell.